Started, everybody. I'm assuming everyone can hear me. I'm unmuted. Give me a thumbs up. I think we're good. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, well, it's good to see everybody again. Welcome back to this second session of the Supervisor Summit that we're doing. I hope you found value in the first session, and we're going to continue that into this session. Bill is here, obviously, and he is going to wrap up the DISC assessments, and hopefully you were able to watch those videos that Bill had sent out over the last 3 weeks. So we're going to follow up on those today as well. And before Bill takes over, I do have a couple items that I want to talk about first. And the first one is we've had some inquiry from the different supervisors on this call about doing this assessment within your individual departments. And which is great because that means you're finding value in it. So I love to hear that. That's great. And we're happy to say that if you are interested, you can certainly have these assessments done within your own team. So if you are interested, then you would reach out to me and I will help coordinate with Bill and your department of getting email addresses and getting those links set up. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. The only thing I will note or that we ask is that this does come at a cost. So if you are thinking about doing it for your team, just really kind of, we just ask that you think about the use for it within your team, make sure that you're going to be able to apply it practically and that it's going to provide some value for you. But yeah, otherwise that's exciting news. I'm glad we get to share this with the rest of your department and I hope you guys find value in it. Next, I want to remind you of the employee meeting that's coming up next Friday, the 5th at 11. Christy sent out an invite last week, I believe. So just putting that on your radar, please encourage your staff to attend. If they don't have that Auer Steel email address, you can forward it to them. You could send them the link in a text and they can use their phone if that's easiest for them. It's going to be a fun one. Marketing is putting together a really fun anniversary video and we have some big milestones this year. So please encourage everyone to attend. It's always a fun meeting. And then lastly, I just want to touch base on how the rest of the year is going to look for these supervisor meetings. I know I talked about it and Mike touched on it in the prior meeting in January, but I wanted to provide some more details and kind of set the expectations so we're all on the same page moving forward. And the meetings that we're going to do are going to be on a monthly basis. And it's going to be around this time frame, third weekend in the month. And I will send out a reoccurring invite for that shortly once I get our agenda more finalized. And we're going to start each month with like a hot topic, or it's like going to be a hot topic open forum discussion. And the topic is either going to be provided by us within HR or you, or maybe through the director group, whoever has a discussion. And it's going to vary. It can vary from anything that's relevant within our current environment, or maybe it's going to be COVID related. That's my example that comes to mind because in our HR world, everything is COVID related. COVID vaccines, PPE, masks, that's really relevant in our world. Doesn't necessarily mean it's relevant for everybody, but that's just the first thing that came to my mind. So if you have a topic that you would like to discuss in this hot topic session, certainly feel free to reach out to Christy or myself. Maybe you're hearing conversations within your staff, or maybe it's a conversation you have in your peer group or you heard somewhere else. Certainly feel free to bring those topics to us and we'll get those on the agenda for this open style communication format that we're going to be doing. And that's going to start off every meeting. And then after that, we're going to lead into department spotlights. So as you know, we've done this before and we started it in 2019 and that kind of faded away with 2020, but we're going to bring it back and it's going to be on a smaller scale. So each month we're going to split up the departments within the organization and they're going to be rotating on which month you guys are going to be speaking. So one month it'll be 6 departments, the next month it'll be 7, and then we'll just keep switching out those groups. And this 5-minute spotlight is going to be driven by you. So whatever you want to share, this is your platform to do so with the entire organization. So it could be a success you're having as a department as a whole, something you really want to share. It could be an individual contribution that you want to point out. Maybe one of your employees has done a fantastic job, gone above and beyond on a certain project. This would be your time to spotlight that. Or maybe you're looking for advice on improvement or something that you have questions on. This is going to be the format that you can bring that to the whole organization too. It's going to be driven by you. So there may be some action items that come up from it, which is great. We will get those noted and we can have follow-up conversations or get you in contact with the right people if there's going to need to be additional follow-up. And then that agenda is going to take us pretty much through the year. We are going to weave in some leadership training. So we'll take a break every 2-3 months or so and do a leadership training. We have a whole agenda scheduled on different topics that we're going to discuss, whether it's personal development, coaching within your team, whole variety of items throughout the year. If you have something that you think is worthwhile or that you would like more information on, again, get it in the hands of Christy and I, and we will make sure that we can set something up if possible, because we want to make it relevant for you. So if it's a question that you're having, let us know and we can hopefully bring it up to the team. And that's it. That's going to be the format. So it's going to be this open style forum discussion highlighting one department at a time. And full disclosure here, Christy, Mike, and I have gone back and forth on this, multiple times now. And we're really trying to figure out how to make this impactful for you and how to make it worth your time. And so we're hoping 2021 is our year. We may need to tweak some things here or there, so bear with us. But overall, we just hope you find value in the conversation. And I want to stress that in order for this to work, we're going to need your participation. We're going to need your engagement. We don't want it to turn into an HR data download dump. That's not the intent of it. Don't get me wrong, there will be some meetings where I will have some critical information to share, but that's not going to be the majority of the meeting, like it maybe has been in the past. This is going to be your meeting. I will be there to facilitate the best I can. Bear with me. We're going to have to make some tweaks as we go along, but I'm excited for it. I think it's going to hopefully be impactful for you moving forward. Christy, or I'm not sure if Mike's on the call. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Hi, Tony. I am on. No, Tony, you did a great job summarizing, the intent of it and what we're hoping to achieve. Just like Tony said, it's we want interaction amongst this group. This group are absolutely critical to the overall success of our steel, and the dialogue, which again, I know that there's dialogue that goes on amongst all of you on a day-to-day basis. But a lot of times that doesn't translate through the entire group and gets shared among the entire group. So it's really a sharing of ideas and challenges, the good ideas and the challenges that we all face on a day-to-day basis, and just bringing them to the forefront. I don't want anybody to feel pressured by this because it's many of you don't have the day-to-day speaking in front of groups, and take this as we're talking among friends here. All right. We're all in this thing together. We're the team that's leading the masses of employees that we have here at Auer Steel. And I would love it if everybody could get comfortable in being able to speak and listen. The biggest part of somebody else speaking is everybody else listening. And if we can achieve that and know that your voice is being heard, I think we're going to be able to really get some great idea sharing and some great things accomplished, and really play off of all the really great things that each of you develop within your departments and spread those great ideas amongst the rest of the group is really the goal here. So we're trying to propagate that conversation in this big group environment, which has become a big group of supervisors here, and whatever we can do to help facilitate that, like Tony said, we will try to do. If we need to tweak some things along the way, we'll do that. But it's all about communication. Usually is. Whenever something goes bad, it's usually because it's not communicated. So we can all be guilty of that, and we can all strive for better communication all the time. So that's about it from that I've got to say on that, Tony. So I'm
Awesome.
looking forward to it as well. I hope it really kind of transforms these meetings into. I personally, this kind of came from me because I got frustrated with just the HR download of the supervisors meetings. And I was like, come on, these are our supervisors. I want to hear from them, because personally, I don't get involved in every single department every day, and we'll have this too, the dog problem in the background these days. But hopefully that's coming to an end too soon here, and we're all going to be able to get back into a normal work environment before too long. I don't know what the heck I'm going to do with these dogs at that point, because one of them is a pandemic dog that hasn't known a world without me being there almost 24/7. So that'll be interesting. Yeah.
Hey Tony, if you're looking for any guinea pigs to go first, I'm happy to offer up a project that I'm really proud of. But I think when I look around this room and see the number of people that were involved in it, you can use the one example of a project to maybe be the pilot to kind of use this company to kind of test the waters, And I would say that Sun Cafe, when I Irvin's role and Laura's role and Phil's role and Mike Daniel's role, there's been so many people touch that one thing that everyone could speak for 30 seconds on it. And it's going to be really revealing and really, so I'm offering that up.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jeff. I love it.
I think that's a great idea. And Mike and Tony, what you all said is spot on. And I just want to add to this group, look, you're the front lines with our employees. I mean, employees, they know who the directors are, of course, but they don't see us every day. They see you every day. And so you have a unique role to be the face of the company to our employees and the face of the employees to the executive team here. So it's a two-way street. And so we need to hear what's going on in your departments, because Tony and I don't always know. And I'm sure there are other people that don't always know in all the departments what all our employees are feeling. And so that's really where we rely on you. And let's face it, sometimes managing employees can be challenging. I mean, it can be so rewarding, but it can be a challenge too. And this is the team that can help you get through that. If you have questions, if you want to know how to handle things, if you're having employees that are maybe they're voicing issues, I don't know if I want to come back to work. I don't know if I feel it's safe. What is Auer Steel expecting from me? This is the forum where we as a group get to talk about that. So again, we really hope that you participate. That's the only way we're going to be a success in this meeting. So that's going to be the going forward.
Yeah, Chrissy, what you mentioned right there will obviously be a very hot topic in meetings to come here. We're not ready to open the floodgates, so to speak, and let everybody back into our facilities right now. But that is certainly going to be the goal through the course of the months ahead, is to get back to more of a normal working environment. And what that looks like and how we go about doing it is just in the early formative stages right now. So we'll certainly be discussing that and relying on your input to really formulate that plan when we get a quote unquote back to work plan.
Perfect. Yeah.
Back to the work facilities plan, because we've all been working our butts off throughout this entire thing. So it's really getting back to the building plan, not the work.
Yes, agreed.
Little things like that. You got to make sure you say right, so you don't offend anybody and don't make it seem like. Yeah, and we've done just a fantastic job of working hard throughout this whole thing, is clearly evidenced by the performance we've had from a financial aspect, which I'm looking forward to sharing with everybody next week too. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, before Bill jumps on, I want to do just a little quick fun poll, because we got some good feedback on it last time and they're just fun to do. So everybody wake up your mouse, look at your screen. There's going to be a poll that pops up soon that you can answer. And it is, if you could have one superpower, what would it be? And then we will show
tough. There's two I want.
We'll go ahead and put the
Only
results
one.
on the screen when it's done.
This could be a whole meeting discussing the virtues of each of those superpowers.
Right? Yeah.
That was hard to pick. I just grabbed one.
All right. So the majority is teleportation. That's a good one. I mean, who wouldn't want to just be able to jump somewhere and not wait in airports and crowded airplanes?
I think we all want to be on a beach right now.
Yeah.
No,
Or on a ski.
too damn warm.
Wow.
I already have a superpower, so I'm not a part of the majority there. My little fun fact about me is I convinced a 3-year-old the other day to not eat the fruit snacks that he worked so hard to find in the couch cushion. And that was rock hard, but he wanted to eat it. And I somehow convinced him that it probably wouldn't be a good idea with no tears. No tears were shed. So that's my superpower.
Sounds like you need a dog.
Yeah, I do. Yes, to eat up those
Hear
scraps.
that. Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for participating in that. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Bill.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's good to be here with you. Good to be back again. I was kind of wondering who answered they already had a superpower, but that is a good one, Tony. I like that. One of the things that comes to my mind as we're talking about session 1 that we did, and now the follow-up to session 2 here is that whole piece of communication, right? With that supervisors, the monthly meeting that you guys are having, man, I believe that is so important. As your organization continues to grow. And again, keep in mind, I believe that you guys do it better than most. Out of all the distributors I work with around the country, you guys are certainly in the top couple of percent, without a question of a doubt. And but even with that, right, as you continue to grow and you spread out both in your markets and geographically, it's easy to get siloed in your organization. Right, I've got my organization, my department that I'm dealing with, and it's easy to get siloed at that point. As well as I, any organization that really excels is really good at that communication level. As Mike said, agreed, you guys are all on the same team, and there's no question any team will go farther and faster if everybody's pulling in the same direction. So I take my hat off to you guys on that piece of the puzzle. That is a big deal. So let's kind of do a little bit of follow-up on the session that we did 4 weeks ago. Now, again, over the last several weeks, again, each week, I sent you a real quick an email with a little quick video in there, just as a reminder of some of the things. Now, I do have to say that a number of you guys actually went in there and you looked at them. Some of you looked at them more than once. Right. The thing you got to remember is with email marketing is we know who opens them and who doesn't. So I also know there's a chunk of you guys who never looked at an email. And so, these tools are absolutely beneficial, but only if you use them. Right. And so I certainly encourage you to do that. Apply what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. One of the questions that came in throughout there was, and John, actually, you asked the question, and forgive me, I was dealing with a death in the family in the middle of that. And so I failed to reply back to you on that one. But the question was, again, what were those, because I talked about the 2 questions. Right, that, are you asking those 2 questions and recognizing the styles of those around you, either on your team or the customers that you're dealing with? And so I did want to review that one real quickly, as well as a couple of other questions that came up over that time frame. And so those 2 questions, again, if you look at that wheel that we have D, I, S, and C, again, if you draw that line on there, would help if I actually turn the clicker on here. If you draw that line horizontally, again, listen to the words that they're using. Think about if it's somebody you're working with on a regular basis, think about the way that they talk. Are they more task-driven, thinking, or fact-type individuals? right, they're either going to be a D or a C. So that right there eliminates half of the possibilities. Right. Yeah. On the other hand, are they more relational or feeling in the way that they talk? Right. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that. Right. What does that do for the, the customer? That kind of thing. It's more feeling related. They're either going to be an S or an I. And then the second question that I told you, again, if you draw the line vertically, right, are they more extroverted and active and outgoing when they talk and they move around a lot and things like that? They're either going to be a D or an I. Or are they more introverted, quiet, a little bit more passive, stay in one place, right? They're not moving around a whole lot when they talk. The tone of voice tends to be a little bit more even. That will tend to be either an S or a C. And so if I have that fact-driven, quiet individual, right, introverted individual, they will tend to be a C, right, and far more detailed. If we have the outgoing, feeling type individual, outgoing, feeling driven, they're going to be an I, more of that promoter. Team cheerleader, if you will. Now, so again, ask yourself those two questions and try and figure out what style they are. And then the other thing that you need to do is you want to adapt your style a little bit to match theirs, right? If they tend to be that I, that outgoing individual, they're talking to people, right? You want to use an icebreaker. You want to kind of open up the conversation a little bit more socially. If they're the high D individual, kind of get to the point, right? Be there, be brief, be gone. Just kind of the facts at that point. If you're talking to the C, you want to get a little bit more detail. Now there was a comment or two that did come back on that piece of the puzzle that I want to address there as well. There was another question though that I want to get to first, and so I think all of you got that group wheel that I shared with you last time. I know we had a couple of iterations. We had a few extra people that jumped in there after we did the session. And so we republished that one. But on there, again, it's a little bit crowded because of the number of people who are here. But one of the questions that came up is, why am I not plotted on the wheel, right? Or, if you look at it, and I just kind of cleaned it up here, right, a little bit. All I did is this has both the natural and the adapted styles with the lines in between them. I just took off all the adapted stuff. So all we're looking at is the natural styles. And when we look at it, because it's a little bit cleaner, you notice, for example, right in here, right, I've got N20 and N21 in those boxes. And if I look at N simply is the natural style. It's plotting the natural style. And then there was also an A style there. But the reason why we do, and then because the follow-up question to that is, okay, N20, and then we look at N20 and there's a whole bunch of you who are N20s. Right. And then there's another 3, 4, 5 that are N21s. Right. And the only reason they do that is because there's, again, when you get more than really 3 people of the same style, to try and put the initials on the wheel, it just gets even more crowded. And so what they do is they kind of group them together. Simply means that all of you are falling right there in that one little box as far as your plot. Pretty much coming in the same style naturally at that point in time. So that's kind of why we've got multiples, right? So in this case, again, Tom, also Lisa, Dave, Carrie, Aaron, all of you guys that really fall into that same category. So that's the reason why that one was set up the way that it was. So here's the other question, right? I'm curious. One of the things that I asked, and I didn't get a lot of responses back. So what I'd like to do is if we could just kind of open things up a little bit, and I would like to know what your experiences were as you're going through and as you try to apply some of this within your role. So yeah, I'm curious, what were your experiences, right? If you tried to apply this, what worked, what didn't work, that sort of thing. Tell me what you guys have, right? If somebody wants, just go ahead and unmute yourself and share with the rest of the team, because part of what we all experience will help all the rest of us learn and apply the stuff a little bit better. Don't be bashful. Anybody?
Well, I'll just say it made me more self-aware of maybe my over cheerleading at times, or, probably more than trying to analyze others, reading through my disc again, made me more self-aware of my personal, I won't say strengths and weaknesses because you're not supposed to call it that, right? But my personal style and be more, I won't say critical of myself, but being more aware of how I'm interacting with others.
Yeah, and I think, Laura, that's important, right? You don't want to be critical of yourself because you are who you are. And as I said last time, none of these are good or bad. They just are, right? And it's how does my style interact with those people around me and that I'm working with. And so being aware of that and how it comes across is important. And I
I
think
also realize I'm a twin with Tim Foss, so no wonder we get along so well. On the wheel, we have like the same adapted style and natural style, just about.
So, and if I remember correctly, Laura, you're a high I, correct?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So, and that's one of the things. Two I's of the same style, first off, tend to get along really, really well. Sometimes they don't get a whole lot done because it's just a lot of fun to just have conversation, right? And shoot the breeze. But other styles that are the same don't always get along exactly the same. For example, two D's will tend to get along to a degree, but then pretty soon one of them wants to win, right? And so we have to, overcome the challenge or conquer the other individual, if you will. So yeah, again, just be aware of that with your individual style. What else?
Hey, Bill, it's Frank.
Yeah, Frank.
What I took out of it is, as a supervisor, as a manager, I've got to adapt my style and my communication to the person that I'm talking to based on, how they listen, how they communicate, how they, take in and process data. I just can't maybe be myself in every situation, and I've got to be adaptable too.
And that's very again, very, very appropriate. You think a lot of times, well, hey, I'm the manager, they need to adapt to me. Well, but our role as the manager is to get more out of the team that we're working with, right? And part of your role as the manager is to remove obstacles in front of them, right? And so how do I get them to see the vision, to come along with the rest of us in the same direction? And sometimes that means we need to, we definitely have to adapt to the people that we're talking with. There's no question about it, right? So that's very good. Okay. So I'm curious, Frank, if I can ask a quick question. Did you have an example of where you actually did that or adapt or, kind of shifted your style a little bit with somebody that you noticed, because sometimes, again, we're 3-4 weeks in, you might not have really seen a major one, but is there an example someplace where maybe you did?
I think subconsciously, I looked at the wheel and I kind of saw who fell within, what parameter. And there was a couple instances where I was talking to a couple people in particular that were quite a bit different than myself. And I was aware of how I was communicating with them.
Mm-hmm. And again, just that subtle shift.
Yeah. And it seemed to, the discussion and the communication seemed to flow a little bit better.
Okay, good, excellent. So if I can, hey, John Williams, can I pick on, I'm not sure if you're in here, can I pick on you a little bit? John?
I didn't see him.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that, John did get back to me with a response, and one of the things that he did, he mentioned is that, in his, so he had a little bit of experience with this, in previous roles as well. But one of the things that he's done is trying to make an intentional effort, right, to kind of focus on this a little bit, paid special attention to the things that we talked about. And he felt that overall his meetings went a little bit better. Things went smoother, and he felt that he had better results out of the meetings coming out of them as well. What about anybody else that maybe had that type of a situation happen within yours? What did you see within your meetings?
I can share that I'm currently training a new employee, And I'm very like procedural based. I mean, just being in finance and credit. And so when I was training her, I was kind of just walking through it, PowerPoint version, just kind of doing it how I learn. And I could tell she wasn't picking it up. And so I saw once she got back to her desk and started working on things herself, then it was like clicking for her. So then when we would come back from training, I would just let her kind of navigate things and I would explain as she was going. And it just seemed to make like all the difference because I kind of changed how she learns versus how I do.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's a prime example, right? There is exactly what we're looking at is, you know, if we always do things the way that we do them, the way that we learn, other people are different, right? And so one of the things there that certainly I've gotten used to doing here within my team is, especially when they're new, is, okay, tell me, how do you learn best? Right. And try and work that in, because some people just, you know, just give me the manual and let me read. And other people want to have you just walk them through and experience it. Okay.
Hey, Bill. can I
yeah.
ask a question?
Yes.
Maybe you'll touch on this at some point later on, but how would you suggest going about trying to communicate with, you know, folks you don't know, or you haven't had a lot of interaction with in the past, and you don't necessarily know where they fall within that grid. I mean, Jessica was just talking about her role, and as a credit manager, you know, they deal with customers on a daily basis, and oftentimes in somewhat precarious situations where they're obviously trying to collect money or trying to work out some type of plan with the person, and if you don't necessarily know that person because you haven't dealt with them in the past, any suggestions on maybe some steps taken initially to kind of navigate that?
Yeah, so that is a good question, right? Because it would be nice to be able basically say, hey, I'm coming to your place to deal with this issue. I need you to take an assessment before I get there, right? So you know how to talk to them. That would be nice, but you know, it's not reality. So yeah, again, that's where you really need to take, as you start that conversation. You're always kind of adjusting a little bit, right? So remember the two questions, right? Facts, task, you know, data type, individual, or feeling, right? And that's kind of listening to the words. So that will take a couple of minutes, you know, and it may even be 10, 15 minutes into the conversation before you really start to pick up on that. And then again, watching them on the other piece. So those two questions are really important. And one of the things that I will do, right? And quite honestly, you know, call me a sick individual, right? But sometimes, you know, when I'm sitting in the airport, when I'm traveling, or when I was doing that, I'm just, you know, kind of watching individuals and watching people and say, okay, what style are they, right? And I try and pick it, and it takes practice. That's all it is practice. What you find out is eventually, after you're doing it long enough, then pretty soon you start to, you know, you think back on a conversation you just had and you go, oh, oh man, I adapted and I was more detailed than I normally am on that one, right? So it starts to happen unintentionally, if you will, you know, just subconsciously you start to pick up on doing it. But there's no question, initially, you have to be very intentional about trying to peg it. And I will promise you, you will get it wrong, right? There are times when you're trying to, you know, you're making your best guess and you'll miss it. And part of that is because, especially the example you just laid out, Frank, and that's a prime one, right? Because when you're going to talk to an account about money, right, they're already on their guard, right? And the walls go up and the defenses go up because they have issues, right? And so they're already in an adapted mode and maybe shut down a little bit. So, you know, you can do two things. Number one, just kind of wade your way into it a little bit. And when you know, if you get it wrong and all of a sudden you say, well, wait a minute, I think I may have misjudged that one, you can change your style. They'll respond to it pretty quickly. Right? If you change that style midstream, that won't be a problem. The other thing is if, you know, obviously, you know, if there's other people within our steel that does know this individual, I'd reach out to them and say, hey, you know, we've talked about this. What style are they? You know, how do they approach their communication? And I just want to double check. So Stacy, you were kind of looking at me. Did you have a thought or a comment?
I guess maybe just a personal experience. So we talk a lot of disc around here. And I've been teaching it to my daughter. And so she said she went to, we have a cookie dough place. And she said that the lady who was serving her had to make sure that the cookie dough was completely round that she was serving my daughter. And, you know, she saw that it wasn't completely round. She threw it back in the bin and started all over again. And my daughter is like, I'm the only one here, but she had to make sure that these balls were perfect. And she goes, you know, that perfectionist, I have a feeling she was probably a high C.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You got that right. So yeah, again, just kind of watching what they do and you pick up on that. And there's no question, right? I've been doing this for 30 years and I still get it wrong at times, right? And so again, when you feel that you got it wrong, adjust the tack and you know, adapt a little bit differently to whatever style that you think you've got. That will happen. It's commonplace. It's going to take place. So I hope that helps, Frank.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
This is Christy. I'm a SI and a little more towards introverted than maybe extroverted. And I find it difficult sometimes to adapt my style to a D who wants me to think faster and say things quicker. And that's not how my brain works.
Yeah. And did you say you lean a little bit more toward the I?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Did you say you lean more towards the introvert? More towards the S and being introvert versus extrovert?
Christy, are you double checking that? I don't know if you could hear Stacy or not. Where did you? I just want to clarify. You more of the S style, the introverted,
Yes.
or the I?
I'm an S. A high. My is S, and I'm slightly more introverted than extroverted.
Yeah. So, and again, if you remember, one of the things that we had talked about, let me just back up. I'll just use this chart here. That individual, right? So you're down in here in the relator somewhere in this area. Two items, right? The first one is the closer you plot to the outside of the ring, the stronger that trait is and the harder it is for you to understand why the rest of the world doesn't see life the way you do. They're just all nuts, right? So that is one of the things that we need to be aware of, right? And I say that again, knowing that I plot out here in the yellow ring next to the R. So that's the first thing, right? So you have to be a little bit more sensitive, where those of you who are a little closer to the center, you can understand that feeling a little bit different. The second thing though is, and more importantly, that style that's directly opposite from you will be the hardest one for you to adapt to, right? They're you know, I fondly say they're your arch nemesis, right? Because, you know, at that point, it's just, you're right. Yeah, again, when we're on the left-hand side of the wheel, it's a little bit slower thinking, more analyzing, more detail, right? On the right-hand side of the wheel, it's faster paced, moving a little bit quicker, right? And so you're right. That is a little bit tough, especially as you get a little closer to the outside of the wheel. That conversation with the D is gonna be a little bit tougher. We want to, you know, that too is practice. You know, because you're right. It's hard for that individual, right, to, you know, so those of you in this quadrant, when you're dealing with these here, again, to be thinking as fast as they are, right? Because sometimes they're out thinking themselves, right? And so, you know, whereas, and I'm careful in saying that, right? Because for those of you on that left-hand side of the wheel, I'm not saying you think slow. I'm saying you're processing a lot of information and you're working all the way through it. And from a detail standpoint, you're probably 6 steps ahead, right? Whereas the D is just already moving on. We don't care about it, right? So and it's a little bit different, and it really does come down to practice on that piece of the puzzle, on that part of it. I run into the same thing, you know. So you sent me that comment, Tony, and I was going to bring it up and ask you about it, because that is one of the areas I struggle with. The same thing, plotting way out here, again, dealing with the very, very detailed individuals, right? I have to stop and really force myself to slow down and really think details, right? And Stacy's looking at me already, right? Because Stacy is far more detailed than I am. So when her and I are working together, again, sometimes she's going, okay, wait a minute, right? You just skip back past about 13 steps there. And so, yeah, again, it's a constant battle. Now, again, that is one of the advantages of having certainly on the supervisor level, having all of you go through the same thing, because you understand that piece of the puzzle. Now, it's something we have to constantly remind ourselves of. And again, it's a conscious effort. It's not going to always come naturally. That's why a lot of organizations will literally take and plot their style, on the outside of their door, right? Or, something. So when I'm coming to talk to you, I know, okay, I need to slow down because I tend to be going too quickly. Because if I'm going to enhance the level of communication between you and I need to make sure that I'm hitting those button points, give you time to process some of the stuff that we're talking about, let you think about it, right? And be able to respond and probably ask more questions of you as well. So that is, again, that style that's directly opposite you is the one that's going to end up being a challenge for you. So when you identified the high D, right, that was right on the money, right? That would be your style. That would be a challenge. So I think I heard that John Williams, are you back in here? Okay. Well, John, at some point, if you want, I'd love to get that input on your meetings. Now, there's one other that's in here.
So John, you can go ahead and talk.
All right, we're not picking up on you, John. But if you do, just let us know, and we'll, like I said, I'd really be curious to have firsthand experience how you felt those meetings went a little bit better. So there's one other comment that came back to me, and actually a fairly lengthy email. So it told me it was probably a C, right? Because there was a lot of detail in it as it came back to me. And one of the things that we were talking about in there, so some of the comments, again, that I saw, the meeting's going smoother, having better results, been applying this, what we learned, not only at work, but in everyday life. That was good. One individual said that they found, again, being a little bit more self-aware, they found themselves being a little bit more patient with other people. And so, again, that falls in. Some of those things that came back, again, I think this may have been yours, Tony. Tough to take the time to remember, okay, who is what style, and, don't necessarily think fast enough to keep up with that next individual. So again, those things are certainly there. Now, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit as I get into this last comment that came through to me. And the comment was basically that they sat down and tried to analyze each of their members of their team. And as they did so, kind of had an idea of what style they were. Also came back and said that they asked and shared that understanding DISC handout that we provided for you, shared it with the entire team, right? So hats off on that one. Well done. And kind of explain the 4 styles. That's why we provided that information to you to be able to utilize that with your team. And then as they did that, also then was open enough to share their report with the rest of their team, and asked the team before doing so, what style do you think I am? Right. And that was a great way, quite frankly, to lighten up the mood a little bit, I think, and get a little bit more buy-in from the team. If you're willing to kind of open yourself up and let other people talk about you, right? And then shared their individual report with the rest of the team and kind of explain it. And, the comment was that we got a lot of feedback on that one, as far as where they agreed with it, right? It made sense to them in terms of what we were hearing at that and seeing at that point in time. One of the other things that was in there, and Gary, are you on the call today? Not hearing it. Okay. So Gary, I absolutely want to take my hat off to you, because again, doing that with your team, that immediately creates a level of buy-in with the entire team, right? So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention. There's one other thing that happens every time, right? And that's that, and it's also one of the reasons why I use the tool for assessments that I do, is that we always hear about that high D, the high I, the high S, the high C, right? One of the things that that Gary did as well, that again, I'll take my hat off to, is he basically took all those descriptors. So on the page with the colored bars where it showed the descriptors, right? So what are the words? He took those and took the DISC out of it so as not to influence their decision, and asked them to identify which one of these did they identify most with, right? And started to build a little conversation around that. Now, here's one of the things that we really need to be a little bit careful of, right? Because when we look at it, right? So typically, we see, again, the high, in this case, high D, high I, right? And those being the dominant scores. Well, remember one of the things I said last week is, or last month, was a low score is just as important as a high score, right? So in this particular case, I got a high D up here, right? Not quite as high an I, but look at that S. That S is so low that, quite frankly, that low S trait is more dominant for this individual than the high I, right? And that's one of the reasons why the vertical bars can be a little bit misleading. Now, we've always thought about that, working with the company that we do to provide these things. We've had those conversations with them. They've been studying it. There's a boatload of research that goes into it. And as it turned out, we met on Thursday. On Friday, I attended a meeting where they unveiled a revised report, a new report. And basically, the new report lays out the 4 styles horizontally. And here's why I like this, right? I bring this up to you today because earlier, Tony had mentioned that that you've got the opportunity, if you'd like to, with your team, to have them take the assessments. Now, one of the downsides of that is you saw the report that you had, it was 54 pages, right? If you've got 7 people on your team, do you really want to read 54 pages of information, especially now that you understand these styles a little bit more? And so we've got 2 things that we're going to do on this this next round if you want to move it forward. Number 1, looking at those bars horizontally. We still have the 4 styles, D, I, S, and C. Remember, the D is problems and challenges. The I is people and other contacts. The S is pace and consistency. And the C is procedures and constraints. Those are still there. But by laying them out horizontally, that now starts to look at it. So that, this same individual, the same chart, I can see that when I'm dealing with the D score, right? Somebody who's what we knew as a high D, it was very direct, very demanding, very to the point, just to make it happen. Somebody who's a very low D, right, would be on the other end of the scale, far more reflective and thinking about situations and mull it over a little bit more when it comes to problems and challenges. And so this is a new chart that is available for the individual for this individual report. And we are going to be moving over to this report more and more here over the next couple of weeks and months. Now, let me just mention a couple of items, right? So that traditional report that you looked at today that you have, again, looks at both the natural and adapted style. Again, we tend to look at individual scores. In other words, we look at the 4 scores for each, the D, I, S, and C, but we gave you 2 different graphs, right? One for natural, one for adapted. And so you kind of have to go back and forth and compare one to the other. With the new continuum graphs that we have in the horizontal format, we give you a single graph and everything is laid out on that same graph. And I'll explain that in just a minute for you. Again, the problem with the verticals is we start to talk about a high or a low, right? Or a strong or a weak D, something like that. And that's really not accurate language. Remember, none of these are good. None of them are bad. They just are. And so now we start talking about intensity. How strong is that individual trait as we go in and look at that? So as we look at these, we still have the 4 styles. Again, D is your problems and challenges. I is the people and contacts. S is pace and consistency. And C is procedures and constraints set by other people. Now, that continuum kind of looks like this, right? If I'm a high D, I tend to be very direct, right? To the point. A low D is going to tend to be very reflective, right? So as I look at these, and I'll get out of the way here on the chart, we look at it, that high D, again, very aggressive, head on. They take on challenges. They're straightforward, just make it happen. That low D, right, again, just as important, they tend to be very low key. They're purposeful in what they do. They're very contemplative, right? They're thinking about things. They're deliberate in what they do. They don't just, pull the trigger and think later, right? They're going to think about it. And that's a very different individual. And it's important to recognize both of those, right? So that's the first one. When we look at the I score, the influence, this is dealing with people and other contacts. That continuum, again, the high I is very outgoing, right? The very low I tends to be reserved. Now, again, remember, you are a mix of all four styles, right? So when it comes to problems and challenges, that's where I look at the D continuum. When it comes to dealing with people and other contacts, that's where I'm going to look at the I continuum. And so again, that high I, that very strong trait there, again, these are the people that we talked about, very social, they're optimistic, they're animated, right? Everyone is a friend to them, right? They never met somebody they don't like. Whereas the low I tend to be far more quiet with other people. They're slower to trust people. They tend to be very realistic in their appraisals and thinking about other people. They'll tend to have a small circle of friends where, again, the strong I says, hey, everybody's a friend. Let's go have a beer, right? So that's the I score. On the S again, steadiness is pace and consistency. That continuum is basically the high S is that steady Eddie. The low S is very dynamic. So when we look at these, that high S individual, again, they're very predictable. They're consistent. They're easygoing. They're patient, right? They're incredible listeners. They're good at customer service. But remember, they only like to do one thing at a time if they have a choice, right? That low S individual is very spontaneous. They have no problem switching from one thing to another, right? They can move back and forth. They can tend to get excited very quickly, right? They tend to move a little quicker. Again, those are the ones that, again, they're juggling 13 balls at the same time. And if I drop one, just kick it aside. We'll deal with that one tomorrow. No big deal, right? So again, a very different individual. And then the last one, again, is the compliance, or the C, procedures and constraints, that continuum. The high C is very precise, detail, right? The low C is pioneering, right? So again, on the high side, these are individuals that what are the rules? I need to know the rules before we can play the game. They tend to be very careful in what they do. They're very analytical. They're very detailed. They're accurate. There's only one acceptable way to do things, and that's the right way. Versus somebody who's that low C tends to be very flexible, right? Rules are guidelines, right? I got my own, and I'll break those if it makes sense to me. They tend to be far more carefree. They will try things just for the sake of trying things, and they can do things sometimes in a very unconventional way. And so again, when we look at it in terms of this continuum, it gives us a much clearer picture of the people that are on our team. And so when we look at this horizontal graph, and I'm just going to go through it quickly, right? We won't spend a lot of time, but if you start using these and you want to spend more time with me, absolutely, I'll give you, reach out. I'll give you more information one-on-one. So one of the first things you notice is on the scale, 50 is in the middle and both ends are 100. So it's not a low score and a high score. Again, you're on a continuum back and forth. And so I can see here, now I can start to see, number one, right, how strong the individual traits are. The other thing you'll see is, so that's the natural score. As I said earlier, we went to one graph instead of two. So the bar itself is their natural style. Then you notice there's a star on there. The star is going to be their adapted style. And underneath, it's showing you with these little chevrons how much they're adapting to that style. Each full chevron is 10 full points, right? So I can see here, number one in the circle, it's showing me the actual natural score is in 82. And right underneath that in the star is their adapted style. And in this particular case, again, I should put my other set of eyeballs on, right? We're 62. It is full, 20 full points. Below that is where that one falls. So I can see how much they're adapting all at a glance on one chart. Some of the key words, again, we're giving you those key words, right? Direct, outgoing, right? Dynamic, pioneering, right? And so we highlight those four styles in each one. What are their dominant traits, right? So in this individual, literally those dominant traits were them, right? Direct, outgoing, dynamic, and pioneering. Those are the four styles for this individual. And then, last is, again, each of these segments is 20 points. So it just kind of gives you a breakdown as far as how that is laid out. And then again, we've got the legend that shows up underneath each one. So the last part about this one to look at is instead of being a high score and a low score, now we're looking at the intensity of it, right? Because again, a low score can be very intense, right? And so really it comes down to how far away are you from that midline? If you remember last week, one of the things that I said was that the midline is what we call the energy line when we're dealing with it vertically. Now horizontal, again, that is our middle energy line. And the farther you are from that middle line, the stronger, the more intense that trait is. So if the individual on that scale falls 10 points away or less from that midline, that's what we call situational. In other words, they could go either way. This individual could be direct if they need to. They can be reflective if they need to, and they're comfortable with it, right? If I'm between 60 and 80 point range, right? So if I'm either, plus or minus really 20, at that point we say you're moderate, right? So at that point, again, you just definitely display that behavior, but it's not really intense, right? And then the last one is if you're 80 to 100, right? Or 0 to 20 in those areas, right? Again, remember that we go now up to 100. So 80 to 100 in either direction, that's what we call extreme. That trait is going to be very strong, right? You're strongly led by that behavior, meaning that that's what everybody absolutely sees, right? So it kind of just lays it out, gives you a little bit more information on this particular chart. Now, the reason why we point this out is, as Tony had mentioned earlier, if you choose, you can use these with your team. Now, what we're going to do is, again, do you really want to have 54 pages to read on every single employee on your team? What we're going to do is as you use the new reports on the team, we're going to use what we call an engagement report, right? It's this new report that came out. It's not nearly as paragraph heavy, if you want to call it that, right? It's a lot more bullet points. It just gives you some of the, the strengths and weaknesses, the, ways to communicate, ways not to communicate, but it's all bulleted. And so it's a little bit quicker and easier to read as you go through them. And for those of you who use this, right? So you'll get that report on each of your team members. But then one of the other things that Stacy and I are going to do on this side is, again, work with Tony so we know who your reports are, right? So who are the people who are on your team? When that individual takes the assessment, what we're going to do is we will then create a second one for you, which will compare you and that individual, right? So if you've got 5 people on the team, we're going to give you 5 separate comparison reports. How do, basically your style compared to theirs. And so again, the idea there is to help you better adapt to each of the people on your team and basically improve that level of communication and productivity amongst the team members themselves. So you can see how you need to react a little bit differently with each team. So that's part of what we're going to do is as we go in there is we will have, every time we see a particular one of your team members take the report, of course, Tony and Christy will get a copy of that report, but then we will send a copy to you and we'll send that team comparison to you as well. And then as we go through that, if you have questions on them, certainly we're available to help you with that and talk you through that one and give you some more information on that. So with that, any questions on that piece of the puzzle and what we're doing and how it can help you, how you can use it? And this new report, just to kind of help you a little bit, will have both the vertical bars as well as the horizontals, just so you can see which style they have. And then the last thing that we will do in there as well is once your entire team, if you're going to have your department go through it, once your team goes through it, we will also create a group wheel specifically for your team. So again, you can see how they all plot out on the same wheel and it's just your individual team. So questions on that piece of the puzzle?
Bill,
Yes.
I almost think people are going to need to see some, like an example. Can you send us an example with fictitious people?
Yep, absolutely. I will send that out as soon as we are done here today. We've got a sample one that we can have. And again, you'll see it's a little bit more brief. It's not nearly as wordy for you to go through. So yes, we will go ahead and send that out to you as soon as we are done. Send that to you, I assume, Tony, or both you and Christy?
Yeah, to Tony is great. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Is this helpful? All right, so I'm seeing heads going up and down. That certainly helps. That's really what what we had here today. Again, on this other report, we are going to give you both graphs so you can at least compare them one to the other. So that's really what I've got on the follow-up today. The goal here is really to that you use this thing. Right. As we started out talking about, that communication piece of the puzzle is so important. And again, it takes practice. It absolutely takes practice. And once you've practiced it intentionally, again, for a couple of weeks, then pretty soon you find yourself just doing it automatically. Right. And you'll reflect back on a conversation and realize that you did it without even thinking. And that's when you know that you're starting to master that piece of the puzzle a little bit and get more comfortable with it. So with that, that's everything that I've got here for today. Hopefully this was helpful. I am here and available for you as we move forward. And again, as I wrap up, just in case you don't have it, each of you can contact me individually if you've got questions. Stacy will, I think she'll throw my email address. There we go. Email address and number up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you've got questions either on your individual report or how this would apply to your team. We're here, we're able to help you with that. So Christy, Tony, I guess I will throw it back to you and unless you have any additional questions.
Can I ask one question, Bill? This is
You
Jeff.
bet, Jeff.
One of the natural and adapted. Can you just speak a little bit more on that, just so I have more clarity? I mean, because on some of the wheels, we just showed one of them. I think we just showed the adapted. And my question would be, for my mind to think about it, is that a personal professional separation?
That's really the exact way to put it, right? Your natural style is who you are at home when nobody's looking and you can just be you.
Okay, and then my question would be, I would be curious to say, would that gap between personal and professional, natural and adaptive, I would love to look at the period. Here we are in a virtual environment, living in a COVID environment. Do you find, is that shrinking, those separate or growing? Are people more uninhibited or more inhibited? That's what I would be curious about.
So that's a great question. In fact, I jotted a note here earlier and I forgot to bring it up. So it's a perfect point to lead into or to talk about that for a bit. One of the challenges that you have, right? So I don't know where you're at in your particular community at this point, but here in Green Bay on Monday, the kids go back to school. Right. So they've been out of the classroom in most areas for a year now. Right. Can you imagine what the teachers are going to be dealing with when you end up with all these kids who now have a new set of protocols and rules, who have kind of been running wild, if you will, doing their own thing to a degree at home for the last year. And now they have to get used to being back in the classroom again. Well, when you guys come back to being in the buildings, right? Again, remember that natural style is when it's just you and nobody's looking and you can be you. The adapted style is the game face I play at work. Well, for all of you who have been working from home, you've been able to live in your natural world a whole lot more. And so what you're going to see is when people come back, you're going to notice differences in them because they were adapting before. And now they're going to come back and they're going to reflect a little bit more of their natural style to a degree until they find a new adapted style that they're going to settle in on. Right now, that adapted style might go right back to what it was last March. Others are going to have a new adapted style. And so that's one of those pieces you're going to have to kind of find that a little bit because again, those people who have been working from home have been able to live in their natural world, their natural style for a long time at this point. So that will have a bearing on what you guys see.
Bill, quick comment. I've noticed through the COVID situation with regard to calling people on the phone now versus having the opportunity for body language exchange, facial expressions and things that you lose over a phone call, that my style is very DI, comprehensive. And oftentimes I'm just looking to get things done. So I might blow right past a lot of the pleasantries, how you doing, and just be right into let's go. I find myself spending more time through the COVID environment, feeling a need for the connectivity with people to slow myself down a little bit, even though it's not my preferred or style. But knowing that I'm doing it, and I guess I've realized it, but now doing the DISC assessment, it puts it in a specific bucket for me and makes me read through it and realize it and see some of the stuff where it's just more obvious and evident, whereas I was feeling it. And when I run into somebody that's a very strong social minded person, they want to just visit for a while first, I noticed that really well because they slow me down to a halt.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about something before I get anything done. Then I'm like, then I get reluctant to call them sometimes because I'm like, I don't want to screw around with 20 minutes of time just to talk through some stuff to get information I need. So I just the funny things that you recognize through reading through some of this stuff. And I love the heck out of visiting with people, talking to people when I'm in the mood to move through tasks. I don't spend the time on the social piece, I notice.
Yeah, and that's important, right? Because again, those people who are really social, they're not going to get anything done with you until they actually have that opportunity to have a little bit of social time.
For sure. It's funny. It's just, yeah, so putting it in buckets is kind of funny to see it when you lay it on paper.
No question. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's almost like that's awesome, Aaron. Yeah. It's almost like there's a natural, an adaptive, and the COVID in a sense, because we're all doing something we've never done before. So it's well, how we are acting is a new behaviors we need to be mindful of.
Well, so actually, Jeff, I'm going to take that. I'm going to clarify that point just a little bit more. Remember, your natural style is what it is, right? You have a natural style. You have multiple adapted styles. You have an adapted style at work. You have another one at the ballpark. You have another one at church. You have another one, right? And it's basically how you feel you have to adapt to the environment that you're in. Well, what's happened over the last year for people who are working at home, their adapted style has changed and likely moved a little bit closer to the natural style, but it's just a different adapted style, right? So you're right. There, we had the work adapted style before, and now we got the COVID work adapted style, right?
Can I respond? Can I respond one second?
What's that?
Can I respond?
Yeah.
You make it sound as though the natural, we're stopping living and growing as human beings as 51-year-old. I think natural is on a continuum as well. So natural may be well defined as us as individuals, but I think it's not a stagnant thing.
So the style itself will tend to be there, and it tends to be established by the time you're about 5 to 7 years old. Now, you're absolutely correct in that it changes, right? Your natural style can change if you go through a significant life event, right? And the example I used last time is I was always a very high strong D over an I, and then 28 years ago, 30 years ago, went through a very, very difficult divorce. After that, my D score came down because now it wasn't always about winning. It's more about relationships with other people, right? So that was so that would be an example of where it changed. And that piece is there. I quite frankly, and to totally, bare my soul a little bit, I'm waiting. I mentioned earlier, we had a death in the family here over the last 2 weeks. And this is, for whatever reason, this one has hit me harder than any I've ever experienced in my life before. And I'm really, in thinking about it now, wondering in another month, is my natural style going to change a little bit as a result of that? It very well may, right? And so right now, I couldn't take an assessment today and see if it changed because I'm still too much in the middle of it. Right. But it'll come out. The other thing that will happen over time, right? You said it's an ever growing thing. A lot of scores, if you have a trait that's really intense over age, it will tend to level out a little bit. I'm hard and I'm demanding, but as I get older, sometimes that kind of softens a little bit. And so you're right. There is a little bit of change to that one, depending on what happens in your life with those circumstances and age and getting kicked in the teeth a few times.
Sure. Yeah, my camera's off. Thanks for sharing that, Bill. Yeah.
So I was 8 years ago, I took this and I was a high D, and now I'm a high I. So to your point, mellowing maybe a little bit through the years.
Yeah, maybe at this point,
yeah.
right? It's not all about winning, right? There's a little bit more to it than that at that point.
I love this, Bill. I love to see the whole group on here. I would say a global health pandemic is that thing for me, is that life-changing event that we're all going through. So I can't think of anything bigger than this that I will achieve it, that I will go through in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And so that very well could be, right, for a lot of people. We were so busy before, and one of the things that working from home and the whole pandemic has really taught a lot of people is I don't need to be busy, right? I hate the term the new normal, right? But as people are going back and establishing what normal is, many people are looking at it going, look, I don't want to go back to the way it was, right? I'm intentionally going to pull some things out of my life, and that will likely change the style. And you're absolutely right. I mean, once every 100 years, you go through something like this. And so this very well will change a lot of people. Anything else?
I just got to say it's a welcome change for Frank.
I was waiting for that. Bob Kiplinger said before he retired, we sat down, he's like, Frank, you got to work on being a little more nurturing. And I took that to heart, and it's changed a little bit. I'm still got a long way to go, but.
We all have a long way to go, Frank. There's no question.
Oh, yes.
None of us is perfect. So, well, all right. Again, I'll throw it back. Tony, Christy, on your side.
No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you everybody again for attending. You have a little bit of your afternoon back. So hope you guys found value in the session, but with that, we can wrap it up. And I'll send out the recording.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right, guys, take care. Have a good rest of the week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.